This week we're going to look at a tune I've titled Planetary Misalignment. And to kind of give you a little bit of history, in my first year at Berklee College of Music, David Mash was my music theory and harmony teacher. He taught this accelerated version of contemporary music theory and harmony, which normally at the school they taught their version of contemporary harmony over the course of 2 years, so 4 semesters worth of material. But I was in sort of like the advanced harmony group, and so they jammed those 2 years of harmony into 1 year. So Dave found a way to jam a ton of information into a really very concise and systematic way, and the manner with which he could explain harmonic concepts really clearly was just incredible. To this day, my understanding of theory and harmony and how I pass these sorts of concepts on to my students is tremendously ascribable to Dave's influence. One of the most memorable things that Dave taught me about harmony is how we hear it, how we relate to harmonic relationships in an order and on a timeline. And an example of that is we hear a first chord, and that's followed by a second chord, and then we sense this intervallic and harmonic connection between those two events. And then we hear a third chord, and then we connect the third chord to the second, and then back to the first. And it's in a way that gives us this sort of feeling of a story developing. And so we can feel things in these progressions that are generated because we're sensing something that sounds like stability or instability to something that's even more unstable, and then something resolves back towards something that's more stable again. So it's this idea of this almost elastic band of stretching and loosening. And creating an interesting progression is how you, and it's just like with storytelling, it's how you create and suspend your ideas and make the audience feel like they're getting stretched and challenged a little bit, and then you sort of resolve it. And so you create tension, you resolve the tension in your musical phrases and your musical ideas. And this is something that really came from Dave. An example would be, having something that feels tense and then releasing the tension. Having something, another example that we use, dissonance and consonance are musical terms that we use that are similar to that kind of tension and release of tension. Instability that resolves to stability. They're all elements that we can experiment with, and that'll help guide the listener through a composition. As a composer, David was really excellent and composed some really wonderful works for his band, Ictus, and I used to go see them regularly at local jazz clubs in Boston. He really liked to explore unusual time signatures and harmony. So common time signatures are like a 4/4 time, so 4 beats to every bar, or 3/4 time, 3 beats to every bar. And he would experiment with 7s and 9s and 11s and 15s and things like that, so he would explore with these more complex time signatures, but at the same time he would create these really memorable melodies and really interesting vehicles for improvisation for the band. And boil it down, he was just a storyteller, and a super interesting one at that. Initially he was a guitarist, but in that particular band he played synthesizers in it, and this is back in the day when synthesizers didn't have any sort of programmable memory or anything like that. You had to actually use these almost like what they called TT chords, sort of telecom types of patch chords that you would plug in. So you would have to create a signal path by connecting from the sound generator to something that would filter the sound and shape the sound. And then you'd kind of do all these patches to create your sound. So it was the early days of music synthesis. And Dave's fascination with technology and incorporating technology into his art practice was very much in sync with my own ideas about how to incorporate tech into my art. As far as I can remember, Dave has always been an innovator. He was founding chair of Berklee's music synthesis department, and today it's known as the electronic production and design. He was assistant dean of curriculum for academic technology, vice president for information technology, vice president for technology and education outreach. He had some of the best titles, I think. His last title at Berklee was senior vice president for innovation strategy and technology, and he retired in 2017. He's just an incredible person. Really brilliant guy. So let's talk a little bit about Planetary Misalignment as a piece. So in this piece I've dedicated to Dave, I really had to write something in an odd time signature. I picked 7/4 as my time signature to play with. And, when I think of Dave's music, it being usually written in these sort of odd time signatures, I just think he really loved experimenting with time. And at the same time, there was a fluidity to what Dave was writing, where the grooves and melodies, they always felt perfectly natural, and they always had a flow to them. That was something I tried to capture. And so I really strove to make this piece have that same kind of flow within that 7/4 time signature. Another thing that was a tribute to him was that I used a couple of particular instruments for the main melodies, which happened to be electric guitar and alto saxophone. And in the band that he was a founder of, Ictus was the name, there was a great alto saxophone player and guitarist in the band, and a lot of the melodies were handled by them in the arrangements for that band. So it was just something that I kind of incorporated into some of the melodies and solos that I did for this particular piece. The other thing that was interesting on this piece, I kind of started off with the 7/4 and was setting up a groove. It was feeling really good. I really liked the melody that I had in my first, what I call the A section. But something super interesting happened just in the flow of writing and in the process of writing. As I was starting work on the B section, I just sort of couldn't help cutting loose with the bass part. And next thing you know, the piece started leaning more towards kinds of gestures that are kind of more common to salsa music, of all things, which was kind of like, I don't know where that came from. But one of the things about it is it just really makes me smile every time I hear that section, and it's just so true of what I tend to do when I'm thinking about David. And there you have it. Sometimes the music gods dictate the results. Sometimes I'm very specific about ideas I have in my compositions, and then there are times when sort of like it's more like dictation, where something just shows up in my head and I'm just trying to get it out as fast as I possibly can. But I don't know where it comes from. It's sort of this weird, mysterious thing. But that's part of the process.